The following is a presentation of the Control Trends Podcasting Network.
Hi, this is Eric Stromquist. Welcome to Control Talk, now your smart buildings video cast and podcast for the week ending November 10th, 2019. This is episode 338, where we talk about all things smart building controls and HVAC controls. For those of you who don't know, this is kind of a labor of love for Ken Smyers and myself. We both have day jobs, so this is what we pretend to be on the weekends. And customers always come first. Ken had a customer that needed to be taken care of, attended to today, so he won't be on the show. But I've got a great guest, and I'll try to attempt to go it solo. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guest. Our guest this week, his name is Anto Budiardjo from Patti IO. Man, I can't tell you how much I appreciate a chance to talk to you. We've been wanting to have you on the show for a while, and today is the day. Anto, thanks so much for taking some time to be with us.
It's really great to be here and chatting with you. I've been watching the show for quite a while, intrigued and happy to be invited. Great to be here.
Well, fantastic. Well, for our industry people who might not know, man, you've got quite a career in smart building controls. How about walking us through sort of what you've done and what got you to Patti?
Yeah, I kind of started this journey in the UK, in London, in the year of 1989. Believe it or not, that's 30 years ago from right now. And my focus area has always been not really in the control systems, but what sits on top of that and the integration of different systems. And the first project that I was involved with was a product called the CDC Engine, which was an integration platform in the UK. Back then, it was integrating trend control systems with Andover and lighting systems and security systems, CCTV and other stuff. So that's really where it all started. And I did several sort of other platforms over the course of the 90s. Several of the products that I developed, the integration platforms, got used in many different projects in the UK and in Europe through a number of OEM vendors as well. So that was really kind of the initial sort of entry of Anto into the building controls industry.
Well, very, very, very cool. And, along the way, like you say, you work with a lot of great companies. I think Anka Labs for a while. And so now tell us about Patti now, because that is an exciting sort of blend of, IT and OT as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, so Patti sort of continues on this sort of integration theme that I spoke about that started in the UK in the late 80s and 90s. And it was really sort of a realization that I kind of had about 2 years ago that there obviously building control systems and IoT is becoming more complex. There's lots of different systems that are being integrated, and in a way we saw that back in the 90s, but technology really wasn't as suitable as it is today with the internet. So when I started looking at it again about 2 years ago, I kind of thought, things have changed now. There's this thing called the internet, right? And we do things differently today. And the key part of that was that most, if not all, systems, certainly new systems and new devices, are built with web servers in mind or web page consumption in mind, right? So everything's all web-based these days. That's kind of that's kind of how it is. And I kind of started thinking this is going to cause a lot of problems for users down the road, because they're going to be bombarded. They're going to be asked to go to different websites with different credentials, with different ways of them operating. And this is going to be a problem because people are going to need to manage all of that. And on top of all of that, I think we all know that buildings is not a solo sport, right? So
Right.
So you never do these things on your own, right? When it comes down to it, you're working with other people, you're working with vendors, you're working with experts in different areas, you're working with maintenance teams and other sort of people. And as well as your team, your broader team. This applies whether you're a system integrator or a facility manager. It really doesn't matter. There are other people involved. So the sort of these these web pages that I was referring to earlier is not just something that's going to be consumed by one individual. It's something that's going to be consumed by multiple different people, right?
Right.
It's kind of like how the internet behaved these days, right? We kind of interact, and what we're doing exactly that. So again, I thought this is going to create a lot of problems in terms of how people are going to manage all of the different things, all of the different systems, but also manage their relationships with other individuals that they need to work with, right? So Patti was created to solve all of this problem, right? It's created so that as users, you can aggregate all of the pages that you care about, all of the web pages that you care about, and then you can share those pages with other individuals that also need to access those pages, and you can collaborate with them, whether it's in the process of engineering a control system as part of an SI's work or a control contractor, or whether it's a facility management kind of team working on that. Or if something goes wrong, an alarm happens in a boiler or some unit, then alarm gets created, and then you all of a sudden need to work with maintenance team or some experts across the country or across the world, right? So internet enables that, and Patti sort of makes that all happen.
That's a really cool platform in looking at it, because again, you can create teams, you can create groups of information. It's a great way to organize action plans, data, and everything else. And I can totally see that being really, really useful in a building, a smart building, like you said.
So just one little sort of anecdotal thing is the name Patti.
Yes.
You may be wondering what that's all about.
Well, I went to the website, so I know what it's about, but I think it's very clever. So how about enlightening our audience?
Okay, so I was born in Indonesia, in Asia. So Patti is an Indonesian word for rice, right? And rice is our metaphor for the billions of devices in the Internet of Things, right?
Nice.
Grains of rice, there are billions of devices eventually that's going to happen. And in a way, you don't care about the fact that there are billions of grains of rice. You care about the bowl of rice that's in front of you that you want to eat, right?
Right.
And so Patti, the system is the same. You don't care about the billions of things in the Internet of Things. You care about your bowl of rice, and my bowl of rice is different from your bowl of rice. There may be overlaps, but that's kind of how the whole thing works, and that's really the rationale for the name.
That's a great name. It makes a lot of sense. And of course, this way, if you see some rice you want on the other side of the world, you can bring it, put it in your bowl very easily.
Yep.
With that. So that is really, really cool. How do people sort of engage with you vis-a-vis Patti? So I'm interested in Patti. Who's it for primarily? I mean, you've given us some generalities, but sort of in our industry, who do you see using it? How do they sort of get engaged and work with you guys on that?
So there's really sort of three audiences that we think about, and Patti is still in early days, I would say. The first group that we're getting a lot of really positive feedback from are the sort of the system integrators and the contractors and people that are actually working together to create buildings, to create these sort of sophisticated buildings, right? And we talk to many of them, and they look at it and say, okay, so I can organize control systems and controllers and analytics and stuff. But before I actually get there, I can think about using Patti to organize specification documents, drawings, right? Budget calculations, checklists, a whole bunch of other stuff, right? Because Patti, in addition to being able to manage devices and systems, it can also host PDFs and drawings and anything that can be displayed on an HTML page can be aggregated in Patti, right? So people say, okay, so we can use it for that. So it becomes a sort of an extension of the project management. It is not a project management system itself, but just sort of aggregates everything, right? And then once you start to install systems and devices, they can be brought into that same structure of pages that make up your Patti sort of framework that you can then share with your colleagues and your vendors and other people. And then the second group is when you start to think about Patti being used in the operations of buildings, right? So think about a system integrator or contractor. It's my first sort of use case, creating the pages, right? And then when it comes to the time where those pages need to be delivered to the building owner, right? Essentially with Patti, they just get shared to the building owner, right? The same way as I would share a Google Docs with you, right? It's kind of very similar to that, right? So then the facility managers and the building owner would have access to those pages, and they can add their own pages. Again, a lot of it will be the systems that they use on a daily basis. They can add CCTV cameras, they can add a whole bunch of other stuff, and they can also add sort of other information that may be useful and valuable to them in the operation of the building, right? So for example, take a silly example, if there is a cafeteria or restaurant in the building, you may want to put the link to the menu of what's on that cafe that day, right? So
very cool.
It applies a lot to IoT and systems, but can also apply to other sort of information that's available and is valuable for them when they're operating the building. So engineers and system integrators, sort of one use case there. The other use case is the operation side. The third target is really sort of where we're focusing right now are the vendors, right? The vendors of systems and devices, of which there are many, many different companies that you know and you talk to on a daily basis. For those kind of conversations, it's really about using Patti to deliver their service to their customers. Okay,
nice.
Because if you're creating some kind of system that is web delivered, it could be analytics, it could be some kind of management, it could be in cybersecurity, it could be controls or whatever, right? At some point, that needs to be consumed by the users, right? And again, as I was saying earlier, the users have a whole bunch of other things to consume, not just that particular service, right? So by using Patti as the delivery mechanism, right, it can be delivered and automatically integrated by all of the other things that the system integrators and the facility managers need to use, right?
So cool. So disparate types of data, you can bring them together in one platform.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That's exactly right. Yeah. But you know, we're in early days yet with Patti.
Yeah.
We obviously would welcome all of the interest in terms of feedback and actually getting this thing going. But it's a change in how the people will start to operate in a more efficient way. And I'm not naive to the fact that change takes a bit of time in any industry, and especially this one. So really encouraged with all the feedback we got, and looking forward to doing this.
Well, very cool. And with your permission, I might post the video. You had a really great video that I think does a great job of of showing the power of it and the flexibility of it. So with your permission, I'll post that on Control Trends as well. So we'll get that done. And then we'll put a link also to Patti, so I can get hold of you guys. And I just got to ask, though, dude, is it cyber secure?
Okay, so this becomes a nice segue to
yes.
hopefully talking about cybersecurity. The answer is yes. That's actually a critical part of Patti. As I was saying earlier, all of these different websites, typically they all have credential and security requirements, right? So you have to log into one, and then when you go somewhere else, you have to log into another one, blah, blah, blah. And it gets really laborious, right? And when securing the system becomes laborious, this becomes dangerous, because that's when you take shortcuts. That's when you have, the ABC 1, 2, 3 passwords, and because you can't remember all of these different passwords, right? So it becomes really complicated, right? So the critical value proposition of Patti with respect to cybersecurity is that Patti sort of hides all of the complexity of the credentialing mechanism. You log in once to Patti, right? And once we have the integration properly executed with the different system providers, the user will then be able to navigate between all the pages that he or she is allowed to view, right? And that's managed in Patti by whoever is administering Patti. And throughout that process, they won't be challenged with any additional security, right? So the system is as secure as the internet, the Google system. We use the Google Cloud Platform to do that. It's as secure as the systems, individual systems, but Patti sort of aggregates and manages all of the different credentials, so you end up with a single sign-on to all of the different systems that you need to access. So it's inherently designed to not only to be secure, but to solve a key part of the security, cybersecurity challenges for building automation people.
No, it's kind of like a PayPal of building automation controls or data, right? I mean, because that's similar to the PayPal concept. You got one point you go in that you secure, and then everything is secured behind that initial login.
Yeah, PayPal, but you know there are other sort of similarities and other analogs, but PayPal kind of works in a
okay. All right. Well, you got to, I'm a cybersecurity novice, so you got to throw me a bone here. I'm doing the best I can with it. So, but cybersecurity is such a key trend that that we've been tracking on Control Trends, the whole cybersecurity thing. So, and you've written a lot of articles. I would argue that you're one of the great cybersecurity minds in our industry. Sort of walk us through what you've seen in terms of cybersecurity vis-a-vis building automation controls, where it was, where it is, and where you see it going.
So I think the place we need to start is really sort of acknowledging why we are here with regards to cybersecurity, right? Why we have this problem in buildings specifically, right? Cybersecurity is an issue everywhere, but in the context of buildings and building automation systems, why do we have this problem? And the problem really stems from the fact that through the 80s and 90s, when electronic digital systems started to proliferate in building automation systems, in buildings, right? Those systems were standalone, right? They were initially proprietary, but eventually with standards. They were typically not connected to anything, right? Even not connected to other different systems, right? Like CCTV, security, lighting. Lighting was its own thing. HVAC was its own thing, with its own network that they don't really cross disciplines, right? And that's why I was doing all of the stuff back in the 80s and 90s to actually integrate them, right? So they were always separate, right? So when your network is completely disconnected to everything else, you really don't have to secure it as much as when it is connected to everything, right? Because you're really only protecting your system. Let's say the HVAC system. You're only protecting that, right? And the saying goes that what's the worst that can happen? Somebody breaks in and changes the set point, and maybe turn a light on and off if you're in the lighting system. That's not really bad. Right? I mean, it's going to be inconvenient for somebody, but it's not really bad. And therefore, through the decades, the building automation system industry has really sort of gotten used to that way of operating, that it really has not needed to deal with security seriously. This is why we see the common problems of Post-it notes stuck on a monitor with username and passwords. Yeah. Right? Which from an IT perspective is kind of the worst thing you can do. You get shot for that, right? Right. But you've seen it, I've seen it, going to control rooms and utility rooms and whatever. So the industry sort of got into this sort of mindset that it doesn't need to worry about security, right? So that's where we start. Now, over the past 5 or 10 years, the integration or the convergence with IT has become real. Right? I know technology-wise, it kind of started in the 90s, but things are becoming more IP today, right? And so when you're starting to think about putting these systems into IT systems, right, then all of this sort of learned behavior that we've had over the past decades doesn't work at all, right? It's really, really bad. Right, so that's really why we're in this situation. Right, many of the products are not really built for the security sort of posture that's needed for IT, and many of the sort of behavior of how we build, how we design, how we engineer systems, and how the professionals operate on a daily basis, it's not a concern, right? So the biggest thing is how do we change this? How do we change the industry from an industry that's inherently not been that concerned about security to one where security is a critical thing, right? Because if you want to connect it, if you want to connect BAS systems to IT, it has to be secure. There's no option to that, right? Now, so the one of the ways that I've seen in the last couple of years that sort of addresses this without really addressing it, right, is separating the network by creating sort of a shadow IT network, right? People refer to this commonly as OT, right? So this is a discussion about IT, OT, divide IT, OT convergence, right? And I believe that one of the driving force of actually keeping a separate OT system from an IT system is sort of extending this sort of behavior that's inherently not really right? We basically want to create a separate system just for OT that's not connected to IT. Therefore, we can continue the behavior of the last decades, right? I think, I can see why people think that way, and I can see that can be a sort of a transitionary period, right? But I think we need to think seriously about building automation systems in the future to be integrated, well integrated in IT systems. So we have to really think about both the technology and from the behavior perspective, professional behavior perspective, to really be as secure as IT systems and IT professions and IT organizations require.
Now, why haven't they done that up to now, Anto? Why hasn't that happened?
Because it hasn't needed to.
Okay, all right.
Really, all right. Because we've the functions of building automation can operate separately, and it's kind of easier that way. And also because a lot of the products have not had the technologies needed for them to be secure. Right.
Right.
One of the things that's going on right now is obviously revolves around BACnet.
Mm-hmm.
Right. BACnet, has evolved since the 90s, the last 20, 25 years. There's been several sort of security initiatives within the BACnet organization, right? It hasn't really caught on because they've been very proprietary is the wrong word because BACnet is inherently open, but proprietary in terms of not being the same as what IT is doing, right? And so what's happening now, you would have heard of this new thing called BACnet SC, Backnet Secure Connect.
Right.
That is actually going through the final phases of the standards process. It was voted out of committee last week, the BACnet meeting last week. So it's going through the ASHRAE standards process, right? And we hope that it will become a standard officially by the time we get to Orlando in AHR, right? And the key part of BACnet SC is that really for the first time with BACnet, right, it has adopted IT-centric technologies. It's adopted basically TLS communications for communication between devices, right? So if you don't know what TLS is, when you log into Wells Fargo Bank or anything on the internet, or when you go to any secure site on the internet, you are using TLS.
Okay, so that's pretty darn secure. So that's a controller-to-controller type thing. Okay.
Yeah. Right. So with BACnet SC, all devices that have the BACnet SC in the devices in the stack will communicate with other devices using TLS. Right, so it's secure.
Okay, all right.
So that resolves a very key problem with BACnet because it was always bus oriented. That really didn't have any technology, didn't have any cybersecurity sort of protection.
Right. So you can see that being like a forward integration solution. If I got a new project and I go with the BACnet SC, I'm good to go. But all these devices already have is it going to go backwards too? In other words, do you see the Building Automation Controls Committee replacing older devices with this new BACnet SC, or is it? Would you actually have to replace a controller? Is it a software upgrade, or how would it work?
Well, you can't. It doesn't fix all of the the insecure devices. It does not fix the BACnet IP nor BACnet MSTP devices.
Right.
The standards does not fix them automatically. I guess in some cases there could be firmware updates, but generally speaking, that's probably not the case, because by putting in TLS, you require certificates within each device, right?
Right,
and that
right.
requires a bit more horsepower in each of the devices. So generally speaking, it'll be new devices that will have BACnet SC in them, right? So the release of BACnet SC doesn't secure all of the old BACnet, right? That's one thing to remember. I'm sure there are products that I'm already seeing in terms of things like routers, so that you can actually take BACnet SC and isolate the BACnet MSTP, the insecure devices, and have a router that will then be secure from that point upwards. Right?
Okay.
So those kind of architecture will happen and will sort of evolve, right? Once BACnet SC devices are available in the market, everybody should use them. I mean, it has to be sort of the de facto. But what's I think the other thing that is really important to understand about BACnet SC is that BACnet SC, as I mentioned, secures those connections between devices and supervisory kind of routers and stuff, right? And there's incidentally a concept of a hub, BACnet SC hub, right, that orchestrates all of these things within the building. What one of the concerns is that it solves those issues, but it does not solve a whole bunch of other issues, right? When you're talking about cyber securing or securing buildings from a cybersecurity perspective, there's a whole bunch of stuff, right? There's securing those connections, great, big check mark on that. Then each device has a certificate, right? How do you manage those certificates? Right?
Yeah, and who manages them, right? Yeah.
Who manages them? How do you manage them? How do you manage their expiry? What happens when they expire? How do you know they expire? And all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And also having a secure network of devices is great, but how do you do things like configurations? How do you do backup and restore? How do you update firmware? How do you get all of the sort of the event information, the syslog, right? And also how to do all of that in an interoperable and standard way.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? So it kind of there's a number of sort of different approaches people are taking. And you'll see quite a lot of that at AHR in terms of not just solving the BACnet SC connectivity challenge, but also how to address all of these different sort of other sort of security issues that needs to be addressed.
Well, listen, we're going to get to AHR because I know you got a big meeting there that we're going to talk about. But I want to back up for a minute because, sort of what we've seen in the field, because it's kind of like you got the IT departments, you got the BAS people, and never the two shall talk or meet, right?
Right.
Because it kind of gets down to money at a certain level. So in the past, the sort of the pushback about building automation controls was, IT can manage it, but there's a cost to that, right? So whoever's buying the building automation control systems, if IT is going to manage it, they have to pay for that. And that gets pretty expensive. Yeah. So one of the things we've seen is a solution is, things, and maybe this gets to the shadow IT or creating the air gap. There are companies that, the BAS people come in and create their own separate network, right? Yeah. Like something Tossie Box or something like that. And what I hear you saying is you're saying ultimately that is maybe a stopgap solution, but that ultimately that's not really the solution we need to get to. It sounds like what you're saying is we need to get to the solution where the controllers are more secure, maybe BACnet SC, but then somebody's got to take responsibility for that. And do you see that being the building automation control people in a building, or the IT people, or a group yet to be determined?
That is really a great question, and I think that is the sort of the crux of how this is going to evolve, right? And I think the answer is a new breed of people is going to materialize to actually get this responsibility, right? Because you're right, because building automation professionals and facility professionals, that's their focus. It's the operation stuff. It's kind of the moving of air and moving of people from a secure, all that kind of stuff. And IT doesn't work in that sort of way, right? So as part of I started an initiative instigated by Symmetrics, this company that I work with, about a year and a half ago, called the New Deal for Buildings, right? Mm-hmm. So we've been the organization's been sort of exploring the issues, right, in terms of how we can actually make this sort of transition and make the systems that we know can happen be installed in buildings. With a blog, and also the summit that you refer to is actually being organized by the New Deal for Buildings organization. Out of that, we did a white paper with CABA, I think it was in last year. And one of the things that came out was really a sort of a concept of facility IT, right? Facility IT being a department within organizations that sits in between BAS and IT, right? Facility IT people would understand the issues with BAS, but also understand the requirements for the requirements of the IT with respect to not just cybersecurity, but other sort of more operational stuff, assigning IP addresses and a whole bunch of things, right? So we've talked to an increasing number of building owners and cybersecurity people, and some of them are kind of talking about the sort of concept of another group, and facility IT seems to be the term that is resonating. So I think that's what's going to evolve, because keeping them separate, as we've talked about earlier, it's okay. It's kind of a stepping stone to get there. But if we really, the reason why keeping it separate isn't an ultimate long-term solution is that it doesn't help bring all of this data that we know exists in BAS into IT so that it can be analyzed properly and be easily managed and be analyzed and be fed into the enterprise system, right? Keeping it separate just sort of makes that hard, right? And combining it makes that much easier, but it has to be secure and it has to be done in the right way. And so having somebody responsible for that is probably the way it's going to go.
Yeah, get the children to play right. Kind of a parent. You guys got to play nicely. I got you. That makes a lot of sense. Well, let's transition to AHR because, man, you've got a great summit, Cybersecurity Summit. Tell our community about that.
So we did this first last year, or this past ASHRAE in Atlanta, and the thinking again goes back to the New Deal for Buildings. The New Deal for Buildings is really just kind of a think tank, or just a sort of a group of people thinking about how the industry, our industry, the BAS industry, can work better with building owners and facility managers and operators. That's kind of the mission of it, how to make this sort of more fluid, right? And so in discussions last year in 2018, obviously the subject of cybersecurity as being the sort of the critical point that is sort of preventing this from happening, right? So we thought, okay, so that needs a better conversation about cybersecurity and a better conversation about how important cybersecurity is for BAS and automation systems, right? So in sort of brainstorming, we kind of said, let's see if we can put together a summit at AHR, right? And that thought was like in November of 18, so it was like 2 months before, and I reached out to Ken Sinclair and asked him if this was a good idea, and he kind of slammed the phone down at me. I thought that was
crazy. That's our man Ken, right?
There you go. So, but so we pursued it, and we got a number of people to support holding the summit, and we did it. It was 7 o'clock on Monday morning at ASHRAE at the AHR, which is in itself a challenge. But
oh yeah.
We brought breakfast and people were attracted, and we got over 100 people in the room.
Oh man, congratulations. 7 o'clock on AHR. That's great. Congratulations.
I know, yes. And it was really a good conversation because it was just 4 hours nonstop discussion about cybersecurity, different aspects of cybersecurity. We talked about Backnet SC and where it was at that particular point in time. We talked about the challenges and some of the things that we've talked about in terms of the concept and the ITOT and the concept of facility IT. We talked about the challenges from specific IT sort of experiences, right? And we had, a good number of companies participating. Johnson Control was there, KMC, Delta, Loitex, Symmetrics, BACnet International was there. I think there were a couple of others that I'm sure they'll forgive me for forgetting. So it was really good discussion, and there was a lot of participation from the floor, which was also something that we wanted to do. We wanted to have this as a two-way dialogue. So that was really successful, and I think that initiated a lot of conversation at the AHR in Atlanta, especially since it was right at the beginning on Monday. So that was really good. So that was the first summit, and this year or the next year in Orlando we are doing it again. Right? 7
in the morning, or do you
no.
time slot? All right, move it up.
So we've managed to get a more sensible time slot, 8 o'clock on Tuesday morning.
Okay, all right.
Still better. Early, but we will have breakfast there for as long as it lasts. So come and join us 8 o'clock on Tuesday morning in room 311G, I think it is. But it's on the schedule.
Perfect.
A lot more about it.
Well, if Ken Sinclair will let us, because he books all our time coming in video and all his stuff at AHR, but if there's an opening there where we can come by with the cameras, we'd love to videotape that for you if possible.
Come in at the beginning, because I don't think he starts until about 9 o'clock. So come in at the beginning. Maybe you can interview a couple of the speakers that'll be there. It'd be great.
Well, so now, Anto, let me ask you something. With all these different people that have come in and these dialogues you've had with the Cybersecurity Summits, what are some things that have surprised you that you've learned from being at that?
At the summit?
Yeah, the summit you're doing. Yeah, did anything sort of go, oh my gosh, I never thought of that before, or this is a really great idea, or maybe where's the education level with people? Are they on top of it? Are people still learning about it? Are you surprised with the progress they're making? But I mean, what struck you as interesting?
I think a number of things, right? I think going back to what I said earlier about why the industry behaves this way, right? It's not that we're bad people or whatever. It's just like that's how we've grown up, right?
Right.
And that is very surprising because you can't do that in a connected world, right? Yeah. It's surprising, but it's not surprising, right? But it's really worth pointing out that that's just how we've evolved into what we are now, right? And we as a group of people need to understand that, and we need to kind of make sure that we understand that that's not the right way to go if BAS industry and if the vendors and the channel is to continue to deliver the value of managing the environment and facilities, right? So that kind of realization is probably surprising to me over and over again.
So you got to kind of acknowledge that you have a problem before you can begin to solve it, type thing. Yeah, I got you. Well, and I'm encouraged from what we've seen over the last several years we've been covering cybersecurity. It does seem like people are acknowledging this is an issue that's not going to go away. We're going to have to address it. We're going to have to deal with it. And the solution we have today is probably not the solution we're going to have a year from now or 2 years from now. We're going to have to keep evolving because the hackers keep evolving, right?
Yeah. And what you kind of have to remember is that this is the sort of the bad thing of thinking about bad stuff, which is cybersecurity and other broader world things like terrorism and other things, that because we're the protector of the systems, right? We have to be on guard and perfect 100% of the time, right? The attacker, the person who's doing bad things, only has to win once.
Yeah,
right?
Well said.
They can get infinite numbers of tries.
Well said. Well
Right?
said. All right. So straight up question here, and I don't know if you have children or not, but imagine now you have a young child, as I do. Do you encourage them to go to school to learn how to fight cybersecurity or to become a really good hacker?
Well, I think if kids were inclined to be, if hacking or sort of the challenge of hacking is appealing, I would encourage them to be a white hat hacker.
A white hat, that's right. And for our community out there, we learned from Fred Gordy that you got white hats, you got black hats, and you got gray hats, right?
Yeah.
So just give your little tyke a white hat when they start getting on the computer, and let them know that's what they need to do. But well, my friend, anything else before we sign off here? Because this has been a great conversation.
No, I think we've covered a lot of the things. I do want to say one other thing. It really goes back to what we need to do from a cybersecurity perspective. We've talked about the need. We've talked about the broader need beyond BACnet SC and things. Is that there's a lot of complexity there, right? And you can't hide from the fact that cybersecurity inherently is complex, right? So something like the certificates that need to be in the devices, they're not simple things to think about. They're not simple things to manage, right? So really what I think we need to start to be on the lookout for are tools to help us manage this complexity, right? That will actually help us help the industry and help people to sort of get ramped up to be able to do what's necessary for to make our systems secure, right? So it's not just the technology. Having the technology is great. Acknowledging that you need to do it, and the change in sort of mindset is great. But you also need to acknowledge the fact that it's complex, and you need the systems to be managed. You need the right tools for people to use, because BAS engineers and control engineers and the likes are great at doing what they do, right? And the expectation that overnight they become IT cybersecurity experts is just folly, just doesn't work, right? So you need the tools so that they can perform the functions that they focus on.
Right.
And yet to be for their actions to be secure and to be well managed, right? So look out not just for the technology and for the change of behavior of the industry, but look out for tools that will actually help us do this.
Yeah, and Patti to me is a great example of that, because again, as one of my teachers once said, "In God we trust, and all else get data." So I think that's one of the things you got to have with cybersecurity is you got to be able to track what's happening and have the data. So agreed. Tools that can take the complex and make it simple. And there are a lot of tools that a lot of people that you and I know, that many I'm sure have been on your show here, that are developing pieces of tools. Yes. Right. And I work with Symmetrics, for example. They're doing a lot of work in terms of increasing the tool set for the cybersecurity issues, but a lot of other companies doing it, and we need to encourage that, and we need to make sure that people understand that those tools are critical for us to make buildings secure. Very, very cool, my friend. Well, listen, I'm going to need your help here real quick. Can you help me out?
Sure.
Since Ken's not on the show, we have an outro. So I need you can you put your thumbs up like this and say indeed?
Indeed.
Okay. Now, you'll get to the part, I'll do the outro, and then you just go indeed, and I'll go indeed, Anto, and that'll be the end of the show. You good with that? Yes, sure. All right, here we go. All right, well, there you go, man. Anto, thank you so much. Great interview. We appreciate it. You can check him out at patti.io. And with that, Thank you so much for tuning in. Remember, be bold, stay in control, and be cyber secure. Say indeed. Indeed, Anto. And there you go. Indeed. That's another week on Control Talk Now. Very good, man. You passed the audition. That was awesome, brother.